Chapter 1. Welcome to Fort Misery. Quote, "You come to Fort Myers on vacation, leave on probation, and come back on a violation." Close quote. Local saying. Alice and I had planned to renovate the condo in Bonita Springs together. She loved the way I had decorated the mansion in the Poconos, so we planned to recreate the interior of that big house in the condo in Florida, only on a smaller scale. But when I arrived in Florida, I was so heartbroken, miserable, and depressed, the last thing I wanted to do was start some big renovation project, especially not all alone. I didn't feel like doing anything. Nothing seemed to bring me any kind of joy. I tried cheering myself up by going to the beach, but when I got there, I couldn't wait to go home and wallow in misery in the privacy of my own home. Movies couldn't hold my attention, and video games seemed boring and pointless. Nothing I used to enjoy could cheer me up. I spent hours lying on the floor or on the bed, just staring at the ceiling. I wasn't even thinking about anything. My mind was blank, and I just stared at nothing. And before I knew it, the day was over. This went on day after day. Life was painful. I felt like I was never going to be happy again, like there was no point to even go on living. I wasn't really suicidal. I wasn't thinking about killing myself, but continuing to live and be this miserable seemed so pointless. As a child, when all that stuff with my alcoholic father was going on, I often felt trapped by my problems, like a bird in a cage. When things were really bad, I thought about killing myself and ending all my problems. I began to look at suicide as an emergency exit from my cage. I told myself that if I really couldn't take it anymore, I could leave the cage at any time. Suddenly, I didn't feel so powerless anymore. Now I had a choice. Every time I faced another situation that made me miserable, I asked myself if it was so unbearable that I should just leave my problems behind by escaping through my emergency exit. But now that I had a choice, and I no longer felt like the powerless victim of circumstances that were beyond my control, my problems really didn't seem all that bad anymore. Was a bad grade on my math test really worth killing myself over? Well, no, of course not. In a few weeks or months from now, this math test would be long forgotten. The thought that I could commit suicide if I really wanted to was actually comforting to me. It helped me put trivial little problems into perspective. Don't sweat the small stuff. And it's all small stuff. In the grand scheme of things, almost nothing that happens ever really matters in the long run. I still have the same laid-back attitude today. I guess once your own dad tries to kill you, nothing else seems all that scary anymore. So I didn't really want to kill myself after losing Alice, but I didn't really want to go on living either. I didn't eat for 8 days. Not because I wanted to starve myself to death, but because I just wasn't hungry and I had no interest in food. My world was not okay without Alice. Have you ever played Silent Hill? Your game character explores a haunted village cut off from the rest of a world by a mysterious fog. Every now and then, your character falls into a different dimension where the same village now looks grotesque and evil, like the whole world has cancer. That's how I felt without Alice. It was still the same world, but somehow everything was different. When I had been hanging out with Liz, the yoga pothead, about a year or two earlier, she was very self-conscious about her body. She was so short that even just a few extra pounds made her look like a chubby garden gnome in her head. As a teenager, she had been anorexic, and even when she was in her 20s, she still struggled with her body image. One day she told me that she was going to go on some kind of new age 3-day cleansing fast. She was going to eat nothing for 3 whole days. She claimed it was good for the body and the soul. Plus, it's a great way to lose a few extra pounds. She asked me if I wanted to go on the 3-day fast with her. Well, she had already talked me into smoking pot for the first time, so why the hell not go on some silly 3-day hunger strike, too? Who knows? Maybe I'd like it. Yeah, right. I was fucking starving by the end of the first day. I thought each day the hunger pains would get worse and worse. But they didn't. Once your hunger reaches a certain level, it maxes out. It doesn't get worse. You're just really hungry all the time. After completing the 3-day fast, I was proud of myself. I had accomplished my goal and resisted temptation. I had cleansed myself, and I had not given in to the urge to shove some food in my mouth, no matter how strong that urge was. And when you haven't eaten in 3 days, a chocolate donut starts to look an awful lot like crack, believe you me. When Liz and I met at the sushi restaurant in New Paltz to celebrate our victory over food, I proudly told her how I had kept telling myself, food is an addiction, food is an addiction, every time I felt tempted to grab some food and break my promise to myself. She was suspiciously quiet. Finally, she fessed up and admitted that she had relapsed after just 1 day of staying off food. She hadn't told me because she felt stupid and because she didn't want to discourage me. So, like an idiot, I had starved myself for 3 damn days for no good reason. Now I was so hungry that I ordered 2 full meals at the sushi restaurant. When I weighed myself the next morning, I weighed more than before I had started the fast. So starving myself for 3 days had actually made me gain weight. Go figure. Anyway, back to my deep, dark vortex of depression after I moved to Florida without Alice. I didn't eat for 8 days in a row, and it didn't even bother me. My depression was so intense, it was even stronger than extreme hunger. And I had nobody, no support network, no close friends who could come over and pat me on the back while I whine about how much I miss Alice. For several weeks, I was a shut-in. I didn't want to go outside because there was nothing out there that interested me. The only 2 people I talked to on the phone every day were Alice's friend Becky and Linda, the con artist turned hooker. Both were 1,200 miles away in New York. Both of them listened to me whine on the phone for hours every day. That couldn't have been easy. But they called me back every day to comfort me and to get their foot in the door. After a few weeks, I told myself it couldn't go on like this. If I ever wanted to be happy again, I needed to go out there and meet some new people, make some friends in Florida. But I had no ambition to go out on a blind date with some stranger and try to force myself to make small talk. I didn't have the strength to be witty, charming, or amusing. And who would want to go out on a date with a sullen, bitter, dull, totally depressed sad sack? Nobody. It was a vicious cycle. I didn't want to go out and meet someone new because I was depressed. And as long as I didn't meet someone new, I was going to continue to be depressed. Finally, I had an idea. It seemed like the perfect solution at the time. I was going to approach this like any other problem I had tackled in the past and take the path of least resistance. I was going to take the easiest shortcut to reach my goal. At this point, my goal was simply to get laid. Shut up, don't judge me. I figured that having sex would make me forget about how miserable I felt, at least for a little while. And who knows, maybe I'd meet a nice girl, have sex with her a bunch of times, and we'd actually get to know each other, like each other, and we'd end up in a real long-term relationship. In hindsight, that was obviously the dumbest plan ever. But at the time, it seemed like a valid approach to ending my depression. Obviously, my cognitive abilities were a little impaired at the time. So I was going to try to meet a girl that's wife material by posting an online ad looking for a hoe. What could possibly go wrong?